Hey, welcome to the Advisors Compass podcast. I'm Chuck Downs. I'm here with Andy Schwartz, and each month we sit down to have the real conversations that advisors are having. Conversations about growth, scale, clarity. And so if you're ready to grow faster, scale smarter, and build what lasts, then you're in the right place. We're going to get started. Andy, how are you?
I'm great, Chuck. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. It's good to
Good.
see you.
You too, man. Always good to see you.
Always an honor. Hey, so let's jump in. And you talk a lot about alignment, capacity, and scale. I think I hear you talking about it all the time. And so I want to dive in today, if we can, to capacity. And so when you say capacity, what does that really mean in your mind in an
Yeah,
advisory business?
sure. And it's probably the most important, aspect of all of our businesses. So first, when you think of capacity in a broad term, think about the idea that other people can be doing the work that needs to be done so that you're not doing that work. So you can be doing the work that really matters, which is prospecting, meeting with clients, meeting with prospects, growing your business. Metaphorically, capacity to me is the power that we go into the marketplace with every day that not only helps us win business, but it also gives us the confidence. And I think the confidence that we gain when we know that we have a winning capacity is probably it's invaluable. If you believe that you can win, then you will go after anything, and you believe you can win any case, then you most likely will. If you don't have the capacity, and then technically, what is capacity? Capacity is takeover proposals. It's tax strategy. It's legal document review. It's our review proposals. You know, it's um, it's our retirement planning analysis. It's our education, planning analysis. It's our estate planning analysis. And all of those things, require a couple of things, right? They require the physical software, and the actual, process that you build within your firm. But most importantly, what they require is people. They require people with, intellectual power and people that can physically do the work. So the two things that are so important to recognize is it's not only important to have the physical tools to go out and win. It's not only important to have the capacity to give us the confidence to win, because we are, in the end, we are the product, right? I mean, we are the business. But maybe most important is we have to know that we can't create that capacity, because if we're spending all of our time creating the capacity and we're not spending time building and growing our businesses, then the business can't grow. And I would argue that some of the smartest, maybe best advisors in the business technically, do not have, or possibly would not have, very good businesses, because either one, they think that the capacity is supposed to come from them, which is a fatal mistake. If you're a business owner, as we discussed last week, that it's not just about being an advisor, because we are advisors, but we run a business. And if we feel that we are the capacity, that we are the brains behind the operation, fatal mistake. So I think that's one. And then second, when you think about the time that's extended and the activities we are not doing to grow a $1 billion practice, because we're not using leverage, because capacity is leverage. And then we can talk about how we share capacity, how we leverage capacity, and we will talk about that today. But that's what capacity is to me.
When I hear you say that, the piece that really jumps out is the confidence first and foremost, and that's what you covered. I mean, you take 100 advisors going out in the marketplace with 50% confidence, and you take another 100 going out with 80, 90, 95% confidence in what they're doing. The results between the two are going to be so wildly different, and then prospects and clients totally pick up on confidence, and
No
they're
doubt.
eating and feeding off of that.
No doubt. I mean, look, a lot of the business is, I hate to say marketing. A lot of it is perception. Early in our careers, we would say you got to fake it before you make it. If you go into the marketplace and you don't go into the marketplace with the expectation to win, if you don't go into the marketplace with sort of the If you're not giving off this vibe to clients that, hey, you should work with me because I'm the best in our market, because my team and our expertise, you will be better with us. You shouldn't be with anyone else. If you can't go into the marketplace with that, then you're at a disadvantage. There's no way that you can go into the marketplace with that if you're an honest human being, if you do not have the capacity to deliver the goods. When someone calls my office, and it doesn't matter what the issue is, what the problem is, there is somebody there that can answer the question, and they can answer the question professionally and with the right information. And that is huge. And we'll talk about, gosh, that's great, Andy. I'm generating, 15 million of revenue, and I've got $2+ billion of assets. It's easy for me to say. And the reality is that there was a time, 15 or 20 years ago where I had very, very small business. And this is something that's incremental. And we can talk about how do we incrementally grow. We can talk about how do we share that capacity in order to get there quicker. But in the end, that's where we have to get to if we want to build a big business. My practice isn't the size it is because of me. It's the size it is because I've built capacity, which has allowed me to work on what is the important aspects of building a business, which is being able to prospect, with my clients, spend time with my clients, and be out there doing the activities that really help grow a business, not analyzing the stock market, not, being an expert in e-money, which, maybe I shouldn't admit it, but I couldn't do an e-money report. I never could do an e-money report. I wouldn't even know how to get on the computer to pull up an e-money report, because I'm just not that smart.
Well, I know there was big news in New Jersey when you actually started checking your own email not that long ago. So, I believe
Exactly.
about the e-money. Let's talk to us about how did you go back to more towards the beginning? How did you wrap your mind around making that first big hire, whatever that
Yeah,
big hire was? How did you wrap your mind around doing that and seeing that, hey, I need capacity. I got to make this big hire. Walk us
sure.
through that, if you would.
Yeah, so when we first started, we started in the insurance business. We were really selling life insurance policies, disability policies, and you go onto the marketplace with a story, and you go onto the marketplace, with illustrations. And I realized very early that if I go out into the market with just a story and illustrations, as good a story as I could tell, as much conviction as I had, which I had a lot of conviction, that I needed an edge if I wanted to have, build a bigger business. And the edge was having intellectual capacity along with that. So what did that mean? In those days, limits on, tax, estate tax exemptions were small. So a lot of people had to worry about estate taxes. So if you could go out and do estate tax analysis, if you could do retirement analysis, and you shared that with clients along with, building the insurance in, or if you could build an analysis that compared a life insurance contract to maybe even say municipal bonds and showing them, real evidence of the power of that asset. But the problem is that I could either spend my days doing spreadsheets or I could spend my days, doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So the first hire was Joe Geslow, who runs our planning department today, 25 years later. Now, I was always fortunate to have partners, but everybody has potential sharing partners if you're in an office and you're not all by yourself. If you're all by yourself, today you can outsource a lot of this. There's lots and lots with technology of outsource available for all of the things that we need to create capacity. We just have to identify it and be willing to pay for it. And the reality is, it's a heck of a lot cheaper today when we outsource these things. I mean, it's really amazing what technology can do for us by using these parties. But if you're in offices, and there's other advisors in your organization, well, then it's just a question of finding like-minded people to be able to share those until you can grow into ultimately they're your own, and then you hire your next one and your next one. The other thing to remember is that if you need to hire somebody and it's $100,000 a year of salary, or maybe total, depending on where you live, it could be more or less because all markets are a little bit different. You don't have to write a check for 100 grand to start,
Nice.
right? All I need to do is be able to cover the payroll for the first month. If that person, with their capacity that is created for me, helps me pick up 5 new clients, every month, halfway through the year, I've already created enough additional revenue to cover that person, forever. And then I can start to think about who's my next hire. So, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with borrowing a little bit of money to build your business. Every other business, in America, in the world, has to take some financial risk. Now, our financial risk clearly is the idea that we don't get paid unless we create something. So one of the challenges for us is every day we sort of wake up unemployed, at least in the beginning for sure. I'm fully employed now because we have a pretty big business, but years ago, I kind of felt like I was wake up every day basically unemployed until I made something happen. But we don't have salaries, unless you're, I mean, it could be your circumstances might be different, but for most of us, if you're in a true independent business, you don't have salaries. There's nothing wrong with borrowing some money, to be able to build that infrastructure, grow your revenue, pay that debt down like everyone else does, and go on. So there's nothing wrong with that.
I so Joe was a win. I
Yeah.
want to ask you in a moment about maybe some mistakes or things that weren't wins, but before I dive into that, let's dive a little bit deeper into, and you just touched on it with hey, borrow money. But what are other beliefs that you've had along the way that helped you build capacity? And then what are the beliefs that you saw advisors that didn't build the capacity? What were the beliefs that they had? Let's call it empowering beliefs and disempowering beliefs. What are the empowering beliefs that you've had? What are the disempowering beliefs you've witnessed other advisors have that held them back
So
from building?
the most important understanding about our business in my mind is that the most corrosive, damaging, aspect of building a business is turnover. So
Mm,
as we start to build out our businesses, if you talk to advisors and the advisors that can't get out of their own way, it's always the same story. I lost an employee. I had to hire somebody else. It took me out of the business for 4 months, blah, 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 blah. So the first thing is we have to recognize that turnover is just amazingly, corrosive. It's amazingly damaging to our business. Now, what I will say is this: as you're building a business, and we're building a large business today, one point it's got maybe 200 employees today. We could be 800 employees by the time we're done. So the one thing I've learned is you want to hire slow and you want to fire fast. But at the end of the day, what you're really hoping is that you hire the right people. And then you need two or three things that you have to do. One, you have to hire people that are smarter than you. And so that you have to surrender your ego and let these people do their jobs. So I'm not hiring anybody that isn't smarter than me at whatever I'm hiring them for, because why would I? So, like, the idea of me training somebody on planning software or me training somebody on investments would really be kind of silly, because why would I bring an investment person on that isn't a much, much better investor than I am? And if that's true, then I have to listen to them. I have to let them sort of run their space, respect their acumen, and then I have to pay them, because it doesn't matter. I know what's in it for me, but nobody cares what's in it for me. Everybody wants to know what's in it for them, as they should, because people deserve to do whatever is best for them. And if they can get a better opportunity, then they will take it. And so the idea that because you're a good person and you're nice and you expect that therefore these people are going to stay with you forever is a really big mistake. So, we've always I don't want to say we've overcompensated our people, because we have great people and they deserve to be compensated well. But I think that what we've always had a philosophy about is we pay above market. If we pay people well, we can be demanding. If you don't pay people well, you cannot be demanding. If you pay people well, it's harder for them to leave you. It doesn't mean they'll never leave you, but it makes it harder. And so it's hire people that are smarter than we are. Give them the opportunity to do their thing, to prove their value, to help the business grow, get out of the way. And then, so that means that we respect them, and that we appreciate them, and that we show our appreciation not only by saying every now and then thank you, because that's a good idea, but also give them flexibility with their work. I mean, if somebody has to go somewhere or do something and they need to work from home a little bit, whatever, be flexible as long as the work gets done. And then finally, they've got to be rewarded financially, because people aren't working for fun, they're working for money. And it doesn't matter as my business grows, I want to make sure that everybody in my organization has the benefit of the same, and they have to be able to grow, and they got to be able to grow their incomes.
what about beliefs that you've seen people have, advisors have, that held them back from building capacity? What were those disempowering beliefs?
I think that some people are way too focused on the expense and they're not focused on the revenue. So people say, yes, I would love to have a CFA on my team, or I'd love to have a CFP on my team that could do the planning. I'd love to have someone on my team that could talk to all of my, if I'm segmenting my book, my B and C clients, so I can only spend time with my A clients. I'd love to have this, but I can't afford it. I can't afford it. And I would argue completely the opposite. People cannot afford not to have those people. Listen, I probably said it the last time we were together, and I might say it every time we're together. The beauty of this business is that we are potentially underpaid for the first 10 years, and then we are overpaid the rest of our lives. And the underpayment years are pretty good too, but the overpayment years are ridiculous. So life is fair. There has to be a price paid. And so the price paid is we work really hard early. We have to either borrow some money or make less, reinvest in our business so we don't make a lot. This is not a get rich quick game. It's not a get rich quick, business. Um, it is a get rich slow business, but it is a guarantee if you're willing to do a couple of things. And one is you got to do the work. And the work is not reading the Wall Street Journal and going to lunch with your colleagues and doing whatever people do because they're so smart and telling everyone how smart they are. That's not the work. The work is the activity. It's the prospecting. It's the referrals. It's the intentional activities that we do every day. That's the work. And then we have to be able to make the investment. But if we'll do that, then it is a guarantee that you will wake up someday, as I started doing about 20 years ago. I wake up every day pinching myself, because I understand, just how crazy this business is, how financially rewarding, and not only that, but how just rewarding it is personally to be able to do good things for people and get paid amazingly well and have amazing flexibility. So to me, it's a no brainer. It's a guarantee. You just have to do what you have to do.
When I hear you describing that, especially the advisors that don't do it, I think of fear.
Yeah.
It's fear that's getting in their way. How do you what would you say to the advisor, whether it's the person that's early on, working their way to their first 100 million, whether it's the one that the advisor that's maybe 3, 4, 500 million that says, "Oh, I'm capped out now," or the billion plus person anyone at any stage that's experiencing the fear of continuing to go forward. Can you talk to that just for a minute? The courage that it takes,
Yeah.
where does it come from?
Well, look, I mean, there's no doubt it's all about fear because if I'm a $300 million producer, if my book is 300 million in AUM, and by the way, congratulations if it is, because that's a very nice business and you've built a really, really nice career for yourself. And we would say that if you stop, then you are what we would call in our firm a lifestyle practice, right? You're not a growth oriented advisor. You're a lifestyle practice, which by the way, we're not that interested. That's not the advisors we're looking for in the marketplace, but it is a comfortable place to be. And if I don't say that I want to be a $600 million advisor, I'm good at 300 million, then I can't lose, right? Because I'm afraid that if I make the commitment, if I tell people, if I share with my family, if I even tell myself that, hey, we're going to 600 million. And if we don't achieve that, then it's failure. And everyone is afraid of failure. What I would say is just look around within your organization, look around outside your organization, have some conversations because there's lots of advisors that are way bigger than you. They're way bigger than me. And when you talk to them, you realize they're not necessarily smarter, they're not necessarily better, but they've done certain things. And one of those things they've done is they've invested in their businesses, they've leveraged their practices, and they've probably worked pretty hard. And so I would say, look, if you're settling, to stay where you are, that's okay. I mean, I'm not going to judge that. And maybe some people might think that people like me are crazy. Like, why not have a lifestyle practice? we've talked about this before, and Chuck and you and I've talked about this over the years. To me, we have an opportunity here to do something really special. And it's not really special opportunity to be able to buy a bigger house or a nicer car or, fly your own private plane someday, although you do have that opportunity. But we really have an opportunity to create a massive amount of revenue that we can share with others. And I know a few advisors that that's what motivates them. And I tell you what, they are the really successful advisors because if you can think about your work having a bigger purpose other than just serving your clients and serving your employees, but you could actually do something with some of the money, that really makes you unstoppable in the marketplace. And so I would say that if you're that $300 million or $100 million advisor that feels like, hey, I'm good, I have everything I need, maybe think about this a little bit differently. Think about how many kids in your community could you send to college, 5 years from now? Or how many people at your church or your synagogue who are having issues that you could actually help and no cost to you because you have the money because you don't need all that money. And so I would just say maybe for people that are looking for motivation, that might be a little bit different motivation for them.
I love that. The other piece of that I talk to some of my clients about is think about how many of your clients, family members, friends, associates, people that they like, that they respect, that they care about. How many of those people, if they're not getting the great advice that your client's getting, they're getting, what if they're getting bad advice? What if they're
Yeah.
getting horrible advice? What if they're running into the next Bernie Madoff? And
Yeah.
and so it's I tell people and I tell them up front, hey, I'm acting here.
Yeah.
Here's the act, and it's not an act really. You're being selfish. You're being
Yeah.
selfish by not expanding and working with more people that are close to your clients
Yeah.
because you
No
could
doubt.
from making that big mistake.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, we can help a lot of people, and look, there's plenty of good advisors in my community. I'm not the only one, but there are plenty of bad ones.
Right.
And there's no doubt that it's not just about our success, but it's the work that we do to improve our clients' lives. Look, at our firm, our ethos, if you will, is really very simple: establish lifelong relationships with the clients and their families for the sole purpose of improving their lives. That is our ethos. And if you have a similar ethos and you live by that ethos, then you will be wildly successful. Because if we can do our work to help them, a long time ago, I want to say it was Zig Ziglar, but he said the way to get what you want is to help other people get what they want.
Mhm.
And if you can live your life that way, then you can't, you will not lose as long as you do some of these other things that need to be done.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Chuck, you asked about mistakes because I've made some great hires and I've made some really big mistakes as
Well,
well.
that's what I wanted to cover next because, it's like everyone sees the wins, right?
Yeah,
Very few people see the losses, see the bumps
yeah,
and the bruises and the crowbars to the head. Share
yeah,
with us some of those, some of
yeah.
those
I would say so. One warning is we're in a relationship business. We're in a client business. We're salespeople, which means we're softies. And so something that I've done, I did it twice. Once it was bad and once it was disastrous. Um, I hired junior advisors, second seat advisors, and they were children of my clients. And I would say to you, probably don't do that. Probably a good idea not to do that. The one was a very nice young man, but just not, he did not have the goods. And I let it last way longer than I should have because of the circumstances. I would have ended that relationship literally probably in 60 days if it weren't attached to a client. And not that it was such a big client, but I liked the client. We had a relationship and it made it very awkward. The second, though, and this is a lesson that I learned, and I hope that this will be something that will help everyone. I hired another one who I thought had a lot more goods than he had, but, charming, spent about 8 years with me, built a business in my book, thought I had a proper non solicitation agreement, um, hired a new chief compliance officer who was also our lawyer, isn't anymore. turned out to be not a very good lawyer, uh, kind of revamped our documents, which made the document basically invalid. And somebody walked out of my book with $150 million.
Mm.
So painful, lesson learned. But remember, when a lot of people, I still talk to a lot of clients. I'm very involved in my practice. Now, I also run a very large firm, so my life's a little hectic, and I do need more help with my clients. I would advise, though, stay in touch with your clients, especially clients you care about losing, because at the end of the day, as much as we think that we are awesome and that we are giving these people a great opportunity, this young man was probably making, I don't know, 6 or 700 grand when he walked out the door. And let me tell you, a bigger zoo-fed bear never existed. He was lazy, but he was charming. He had a nice relationship with a lot of these clients, and a lot of them I'd never met, right? Because he was building clients in my book. Now, the good news is I was paying him so much that the financial hit didn't really matter. And we've already, found all of it. And you know what? I'm glad he's gone. So I think in the grand scheme of things, the universe provided for me because he wasn't a good fit for me. He wasn't really a good guy. But with that said, though, if you've got advisors that are on your teams that are controlling a lot of your AUM, number one, you better make sure that you have really good agreements. And there's no such thing as a non-compete, but you can have non-solicitation agreements where at least they have to buy the book. So just be really careful with that. And try to stay in touch with clients that you wouldn't want to lose. Doesn't mean that you can't, you're not talking to them every review, but it's just not a bad idea, to stay in touch with people and make sure that everybody recognizes that, that it's your business and then these people work within your business. So that was a couple of big mistakes that I made, that I will not make again. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And thanks for sharing those.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Again, it's so easy to see all the wins, right? But
Yeah.
that's where the lessons are. That's where the big lessons are. You say all the time, I don't really learn anything when I win the file. I learn when I lose the file.
Absolutely. The bigger the loss, the better the lesson. Yeah, the better the lesson. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. What about Andy? What about let's talk about some of the biggest capacity wins you've had. What were some of the best hires that you made so that our listeners can maybe model those hires? So
Sure. So I hired Paul Magistro about 25 years ago, I want to say. He was working in a bank. He was actually in an MBA JD program at NYU at night. Um, I hired him, and what that allowed me to do is think of him as my chief of staff. So calls are coming in, and they have been for years. Calls come in every day, and it could be about their pension, it could be about their defined benefit plan numbers, it could be about trust documents, ownership, whatever it is. And I don't ever have to get involved in any of those conversations because he's really, really smart. Now I pay him really, really well. He probably makes more money than 80% of the advisors in my firm. I think that's probably a fair statement, at least 70% of the advisors in my firm. Um, and has a fair amount of equity because I've given him all of my team. I've given them my part of my equity. And the reality is that when a new controller comes in and they look at my P&L and they say, "Wow, like what's happening here?" My HR woman, when our new HR woman that we hired 2 years ago, when she started to look at my payroll, she had a heart attack. She came from corporate America, and she's like, How is it possible that some of these people are making as much money, particularly?" But again, we've talked about this over and over again. It is never an expense issue in this business, it's a revenue issue. You cannot create $15 million of revenue without, and I only have about 7 or 8 of them on my team, without really, really good, smart people. And he's with me for 25 years for a reason. I'm not always an easy guy to deal with, so I mean, I think it's fair to say I'm a pain in the ass, to deal with, but I'm fair. I'm loyal. I do what I say I'm going to do always, and I share. And I think that that's all people want. They just want to know that their boss is loyal to them. If they're going to be loyal to the boss, I think they want to know that they are going to do what they say. I think a mistake people make is they say, "Oh yeah, well, I'll bonus you. I'm going to do this and that," and then we're renegotiating with them in December. That is a fatal, fatal mistake because when you do that, you've lost their trust. When you've lost their trust, it's over. It's over. The relationship is ruined. And so, even if you make an offer that was really stupid and you're like, wow, I should have thought that through better. Like, this is ridiculous. It doesn't matter. You got to do what you say you're going to do. And so that he's a fantastic, you know, the guy that does my trading, Danny Thorne is fantastic. He's been with me for 20, I want to say 20 years. My analyst team, are terrific. These are people that are picking up emails on weekends. They're always watching my emails. They're answering client emails. And not that I expect that. I don't tell anyone that they have to work in a weekend. I would never have anyone come to the office on a weekend. But what's happened is my clients are their clients because everybody is fully invested. And the key, I think, to this is it can't just be my clients. It can't be our client. It's got to be their client too. And the best advisors that I've met, that's the way it is. My new partner, who I love, Kevin Spawn, his people, they love him. They trust him. And he's built a fabulous business with the help of these people because again, he's going to do what he says he's going to do. He's loyal to them. They're loyal to him. And I just think you can't build a business the size of businesses that we want to build without that.
So how would you briefly, how would you for the advisor that says, "Okay, what is a Paul?" How
Yeah.
would you describe what a Paul is?
Yeah,
'Cause
so think of Paul. Think of Paul. Paul's the guy that's in the office all day, every day for any incoming calls that typically would go to me. Clients like, oh, my defined benefit plan. I'm talking to my actuary. We've got a call next on Monday. Client inherited some money. They want to talk about can they disclaim assets? What are the ownership? The assets are another firm. It was her father. So now we're going to get on the phone with the advisor. Now I'll probably be on the phone because we're probably competing a little bit for that, and I just wanted to know I'm interested. But Paul will handle the call. He'll get all the information. He'll handle the call. It makes my schedule. Running interference. I mean, calls that come in all day. Most of those calls are not necessary for me to take. Now, if it's something that I think I need to get involved in, I'll either take the call or call back. But most of it is and also just directing the traffic. Should the call go to Danny? Should the call go to one of the analysts? Should the call go to Kim? Where should the call go? So I miss that. Those 50 plus phone calls a day, most of those emails, he handles. Because if I had to handle all that, I wouldn't get anything done. So all I do all day is I'm just on the phone with clients and prospects all day. That's what I do all day.
So you're on offense all day
All day.
because Paul handles all the defense and even some of the offense, making sure that your calendar's
Correct, and
fluid.
and and his job is to fill the calendar, and the clients love him, they're used to him, and again, there's a comfort, in talking to the same people year after year after year, Danny and Paul and Kim, and Brett and all of them, and there's real power in that. We made a little bit of we made a little bit of a name change, and all people said to me was, "As long as I'm dealing with Paul and Danny and the team, then I don't care what you guys call yourselves." So that's really, really important. That's really important.
So I also heard you say you paid them well up front, but then as you grow, they grow as well.
Absolutely. There's got to be something in it for them. I said it last time we talked. I make lots of money. If my employees that are talking to our clients do not make money and they're struggling, to make money. When the phone rings, they have a choice what they say to these clients, how they talk about their boss. And it doesn't have to be that they can say, "Oh, my boss is a total, cheapskate, ass." They're not going to come out and say that, but they have opportunities to say things. And they're representing us. We don't want people that are representing us that are mad at us because we don't pay them well. So I just think we should be mindful of that. Yeah, these people are in the middle of our lives, and they know everything that's going on. So, we should recognize that.
Maybe a couple of 2 more questions, I think, and then we'll wrap this one up. When you look at, because you talked to a lot of you talked to a lot of advisors in that 300, 400, 500, $600 million range, and a billion plus. In that middle range, what are you seeing as the biggest capacity shortcoming?
Yeah, it's definitely hiring that high priced, you know, employee. It's taking that next step where maybe you go from a good analyst to hiring that CFA. And again, I've seen the bigger practices do it. Most of the bigger practices that we are talking to bring on board, they have a CFA on staff that is really getting involved in their investment, allocations and investment conversations with clients. I mean, look, I have Peter Bookvar in my office. He's my chief investment officer. Half the world reads Peter every day. I mean, Fed presidents read Peter every day. I mean, the credibility is amazing. And so to have a resource like that, that when clients have questions, especially if they're really, really smart, financially oriented professionals with questions, I love having Peter in a meeting, have him on a Zoom call. I mean, especially when like I had one in, had a client in the other day. I love this guy. He's older. He's a Wall Street professional. He's very wealthy. He's very difficult. I mean, he just loves to come in. Like he'll say to me at the end of the meeting, "Wow, you defended yourself well today," because that's what it's like. He just comes in, wants to beat the hell out of me, and I finally realized all I got. I brought Peter into a meeting. We spent half an hour, this week. Oh my goodness, guy writes me a big check and says, "Do whatever you want," and I'm like, finally. It took me a little while. I didn't play that hand like I should have. I should have got him in on the first meeting, but when you have those people, you talk about where we started this conversation, this idea of capacity, the smarter they are, the more successful, the more experienced. They're expensive. You say, well, do I want to make 200 grand less? I would argue you're not going to make 200 grand less. You're going to make more. Your expenses might be 200 grand more, for that person, but you will make more because they will help you make more. And I think that's the biggest mistake people make. They're not willing to hire that next level, employee, that next level of expertise.
I think one of the questions that some of our listeners would have right now is, yes, but how do I avoid overspending? Do you have
Yeah.
any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I look at some practices where people have a practice my size with 50 employees. Like, I don't get it. Now, I will say that being part of the firm, I'm able to leverage. So that's part of it. Don't just be big, though, for the sake of being big. Don't be big for the sake of your LinkedIn picture because, we are in a business, that the P&L matters. We are in a business where profit matters. But what I would say is when you find yourself doing things that are not productive, when you find yourself going into the marketplace and you can't compete, then there's a problem. And so if I'm not productive because I'm doing things I shouldn't be doing, then whatever that task is, you need to hire somebody. And that's a good hire and that's a valuable hire. If I go into the marketplace and I can't compete because I'm missing something, then find that. But don't just bring people on because you want to be bigger, because, oh, yeah, I've got the biggest team in the system. And, again, yes, it's not an expense problem, it's a revenue problem. But I've always tried to operate my business at somewhere between 55 and 60% profit margin. And if my revenue is large enough, that should be pretty easy to do. So I would just say, it's a balancing act. But in the beginning, if you don't have the capacity you need, it doesn't matter, what your P&L looks like. You've got to buy the capacity because without it, it's like I always like to use the expression, capacity is like electricity. I don't need it all the time. Like, look, I'm at the beach today. I'm only here on weekends. That means Monday through Thursday, there is no lights on in the house. So I don't need electricity. But when I got here last night and I turned the switch on, I want the lights to go on. I want the power. I want the capacity. And so to me, capacity is like electricity. It's like power. And so if we're going to share capacity with others, we have to be flexible. I don't care if I don't talk to my analyst. If I'm sharing an analyst with another advisor, I don't care if I don't see that person all week. I've always shared with my partners. And it's like, oh, wow, you're paying more. Yeah, I pay more because my book's bigger. And you didn't see them all week. Well, I don't care because maybe next week I'll need that person a lot. But when I need them, as long as they're there, then it doesn't matter to me. And that's a problem for a lot of people. because a lot of people, they want their money's worth. I pay you, I pay half your salary. I want you in my office half the time. I want you when I call. I want you. Yeah, yeah, silly. That's silly. You got to lose that. What you want is you want the capacity when you need it. And if you can discount or leverage that cost by sharing, then you have to be able to share nicely, right? You have to be able to play nice in the sandbox because nobody wants to partner or share people with the person that can't play nice. And if you can't, then shame on you because you've hurt yourself because you've taken away a leverageable opportunity for that capacity.
So what you're describing is to really view it as you've got that capacity on retainer. It's there when you need it.
Exactly.
Don't
Exactly right.
time it.
Exactly. And listen, look, I have a guy that drives me. And I know he's nervous because I pay him 2 days a week, no matter what. And the reality is, most weeks I don't see him because most weeks I don't need it. But when I need it, I want it. And I said to him, Paul, don't stress. It's fine. We're good because I just want to know that when I need you, I've got to go, I've got to leave town to see a prospect, an advisor prospect next week. And I want to know that I have my ride to the airport. I have, and I could take an Uber, or if I have to go, to a meeting, or if I want to get Marlene somewhere, if I want to pick up an advisor flying into town, I want to know I have that. And so it's just the capacity I want. I'm willing to pay for that. I don't need it all the time, but when I need it, I want to have it. And I think that's how we have to view all of this. If we're going to share, if we're 100%, then it doesn't matter. They're always available to us.
Right. Right. Well, this was great, Andy, as always. For our listeners, I would encourage you to go back, review your notes if you made notes, if you didn't, do it next time. But think of one thing, just at least one thing that you took from this podcast today. Take it and put it into action. We never want to leave the scene of learning something without taking the next step towards that. So, what are you going to do to put something in action today, right now? And as always, we appreciate you joining us here on the Advisors Compass podcast. And, if today's conversation gave you clarity or if it sparked a new idea, then we'd love for you to subscribe so you never have to miss what's next. And if you would, share it with another advisor who you think would benefit, because when you grow faster, when you scale smarter, when you build what lasts, then you create clarity every step of the way. It's an honor to share with you from both Andy and myself. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Awesome. Great seeing you, Chuck.
Great seeing you, Andy. Have a beautiful
Take
day.
care. You too, man. Bye bye.
Investment advisory and financial planning services offered through Bootley Financial Group, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor, doing business as One Point BFG Wealth Partners, herein referred to as One Point BFG. One Point BFG is not affiliated with Advisor Compass. Chuck Downs is not affiliated with One Point BFG, nor compensated by One Point BFG. The opinions expressed by Andy Schwartz are my own personal views and experiences as an investment advisor representative. The information contained herein is provided for informational and discussion purposes only and is not and may not be relied on in any manner as legal, tax, accounting, or regulatory advice, nor does this constitute an offer to sell or solicitation to offer to buy any securities and may not be used or relied upon in connection with any offer or sale of securities. The information as set forth herein should not be construed or interpreted as One Point BFG's guarantee of any particular investment outcome or a guarantee of future investment returns or results.